Hello everyone, nice to see you again. So now we are moving to week number 11. That's the second last week of the semester. And this week, you might be glad to know that I deliberately reduced the workload for the lectures for a reason. So if you look at the lecture hours for this week, it's actually only 2 hours over here. So it's like a 1 hour decrease. However, I promised that for your last week of the lecture for the semester, I'm not going to increase any workload. Okay, so it's just going to be the standard 3 hours. Just for this week, I kind of reduced the workload by 1 hour. So what can you use for the 1 hour? I have some recommendation. It's kind of up to you, your choice. Option number one, you have some optional tutorials that's actually going to help you with the design pattern, which is the visitor design pattern that we're going to cover this week. You can actually go over the tutorial videos by using the 1 hour. That's one choice if you're still catching up with everything. And number two, you can actually choose to work on your projects if you wish. And remember, phase one is actually due very soon. And also, for the ultimate solution for the projects, you might need some extra time to work on that if you wish. So that'll be the second choice you have. And the third choice, maybe you want to catch up with the other lectures. And you may want to start thinking about the exam, which is going to be December 20th. It will be about 12 days after the last day of the semester, but you may want to start thinking about maybe to study your notes and study the lecture and also rewatch parts of the lecture if you wish, right? So these are the different choices, or you simply just want to take a break. That's also fine, right? So I'm leaving the choice to you about how to make use of this spare 1 hour for the workload, all right? Okay, so this week, we're just going to cover the final design pattern for the course, which is called a visitor design pattern. You can think about this as like a continuation of the topic of the composite design pattern about dealing with recursive systems. And we started talking about this from last week. And let's take a quick look at the flow of the lecture. So we are talking about the motivating problem, which is about processing the recursive system. How can you support the various operations for the recursive system? You want to have a nice design. And the first design attempt that we're going to show to you actually will violate a couple of design principles, namely the cohesion and also the single choice principle. So simply having a straightforward extension to the composite pattern is not a way to go design-wise. So that's why we want to introduce to you this new design pattern. And then we're going to talk about a new design principle called the open-close design principle. It sounds contradictory literally, but it's not actually what you think. So that's why you got to study the lecture to see what the design principle really is meant for. Okay, and we'll talk about architecture of the visitor design pattern. We'll talk about the runtime, especially about implementation, and there's a special phenomenon for the visitor design pattern called the double dispatch, meaning that the dynamic binding is going to occur twice by a single line. So that's an interesting fact for you to learn about, okay? So which you haven't seen before previously. And then we'll revisit the visitor pattern by talking about the single choice principle. So just want to judge to see whether the visitor pattern is really the way to go always, or maybe there should be some limitation and some assumption you have to make. So that will be the flow for this week. All right, as usual, I also include the iPad notes for your study. Okay, you can make use of them. And these are the slides just for the visitor design pattern. And then there's some parts of the slides which I didn't really read off the slides to go over in detail. Instead, I try to do as much visual illustration as I could, as usual, just to help you learn more effectively. So definitely have to study the notes and also the videos, try to study them at the same time. In terms of the tutorials, let me emphasize both of them are simply just optional for this week. However, for those of you who want to maybe strengthen your understanding beyond the lectures, I would recommend at least follow the tutorial for the composite and visitor design pattern. So that would be what I recommend. That one really try to show to you how to build the composite and visitor design patterns from scratch. So that could be a nice hands-on experience for you. Later on, if you try to program the visitor design pattern in any OOP, that tutorial can also be beneficial. The second one is actually more advanced tutorial video, which I recommend for those of you who want to explore very deep into the visitor design pattern in a broader practical context. So that's about using a framework of Antler 4, and then for parser generator to develop composite, or basically just about developing a language compiler. It's a tutorial video I made for a 4th year senior level course for compilers and interpreters. And the visitor design pattern is actually a critical component for building a compiler. So for those of you who want to learn about building a compiler, a language processor, you can feel free to explore this. This particular tutorial is outside the scope of this course. However, I make a reference to you for those of you who want to explore something more advanced. That would be the way to go. If you got any questions about building the compiler, feel free to get in touch with me. I'll be more than happy to help you to understand the details. All right, and then we got a one design diagram for the visitor design pattern. And as usual, post your questions on the Google Doc. And then, so these are the 2 tutorials I just talked about. There will be no source code made available to you this week. However, if you want to follow through the tutorial, you definitely get a source code for free, right? All right, so that's about the flow for this week. Let's talk about learning objectives very quickly. I already spoke about them. So number 1, we're going to think about the problem for processing the recursive system rather than just building them. So think about the composite design pattern is about how you can build and structure a recursive system. And the visitor design pattern that we talk about this week is to think about how you can process the recursive systems using the various operations. Okay, and we'll see design attempt number 1, which will violate cohesion and also single choice principle. We'll see why. And then we're going to introduce to you the visitor design pattern. We'll talk about architecture, the bound design diagram, and also implementation, both for the supplier and also for the clients. We want to know how they write their code in order to either implement it or to use it. And then we'll talk about this very important phenomenon called double dispatch, meaning that dynamic binding occurs 2 times by a single line. But you're going to see exactly how it's going to happen. All right, milestone for this week. So you will have to continue to work on the projects for sure. You can make use of that one spare hour to do it. And then you want to complete your quiz number 10 from last week. And also you definitely want to start with this particular week's lecture. And then, so these 2 optional tutorial videos are for those of you who want to explore further beyond the lecture. So I made that optional, but I hope that some of you will actually choose to do so for your knowledge and for your learning. All right, so that's about what's going to happen for week 11. That will be the second last week for the semester. And then, as I said, this week, the 1 week, the 1 hour reduction is actually really for your learning benefits. You can feel free to use it in whatever way you feel necessary. And then for the final week, for week 12, I'm just going to go back to the standard 3-hour lecture, no more and no less. And then we're going to speak about the final topic for the course, which is about program verification, about software correctness. That will be more about applying what you learned back in 1090 and a little bit about 3101. But don't worry, if you haven't taken 3101, I will speak about the concept from scratch. So you need not study anything from 3101. All right, so that's about the plan to finish off the semester. And off you go, and you can do your work and then get in touch with me as ever if you got any trouble.